This is NatSec Matters.
I'm host Michael Allen with Beacon Global Strategies. On this week's episode, I'm joined by Dr. Tom Karako, Director of the Missile Defense Project at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, where he focuses on missile defense and nuclear deterrence. Our conversation, recorded just before the U.S. launched strikes on the nuclear facilities in Iran, covers the conflict, but in particular, the role of ballistic missiles. Tom also discusses the Trump administration's Golden Dome initiative and its potential impact on U.S. national security. Stay with us as we speak with Dr. Tom Karako. Tom, thank you so much for joining the podcast. We're so happy to have you.
Hey, Michael, good to be here.
Tom, there's almost no newspaper article in the world that's about missile defense or hypersonics or ballistic missiles that doesn't quote you. So you are the absolute right person for us to talk to. We intended this when we invited you to be primarily about Golden Dome. But since this war has broken out and ballistic missiles are such a big part of it, this is just a great coincidence for us, and we're so happy to have you for this discussion.
Looking forward to it.
Tom, let's talk a little bit about what's going on presently here in the war. It seemed as if President Trump was on the doorstep of the United States getting involved, perhaps to drop a bunker buster bomb. He seemingly now needs a couple of weeks, maybe it's a feint, to make the Israelis or make the Iranians more comfortable or to decrease their readiness a little bit. But we're now wondering whether the president is going to get involved here. What's your sense of how things are going? What do you think of this 2-week delay?
Yeah, usually giving your enemies 2 weeks to regroup is not going to decrease their readiness, but presumably to increase it, although it's contingent upon, the again, astonishing success of the Israeli Air Force. The Israeli Air Force is just really cleaning up. They've got air superior over the skies and are basically bombing. I suspect they're limited only by the number of pilot sleep hours in terms of going back and forth and the number of bombs that they can load, frankly. So good on them for doing what they can with the resources that they have. I'll just say I think I'm trying to decide which President Trump this is. Is this the President Trump that went after Soleimani, or is this the President Trump that kind of blinked after the Iranians shot down the Global Hawk, which, by the way, was one of the reasons things escalated to the Soleimani thing, which folks tend to forget. I'll just say, Michael, as well, that this isn't the first time the president's kind of given this 2-week window. I think that was offered with Ukraine ceasefire not so very long ago. And so I would say it's a little disappointing to hear. I think that the Iranians, again, big picture here, October 7 transformed the Middle East. It transformed the Israeli posture to their threats in a true, never again kind of approach, and a counteroffensive kind of approach. The Iranians have never been weaker. And I think it's a choice between triumph and tragedy. And I think it would be a tragedy not to help exorcise this cancer from the Middle East. And I don't just mean the nuclear program. The Israelis, our Israeli friends, could use some help on that front, but also fundamentally the conventional missile forces, the Iranian military, and yes, in the fullness of time, the regime. And I would add to that a corollary, which is that kind of like how Syria's regime was changed after Bashar Assad was gone. It doesn't necessarily need to be a democracy, but it needs to be not the mullahs, and it needs to be a regime that is not aligned with Russia in the way that Assad and the mullahs have been.
Yeah, I hear you. Tom, there's so much discussion about a bunker buster bomb, the MOP, and its success, and we know you're briefed up or knowledgeable about everything, so I don't want you to say anything that's classified, of course, but we read about this particular bomb, and I wonder if you might tell us a little bit about it. How does it work? Is it very likely to be successful? And can it really bore into a mountain and penetrate a centrifuge hull that by some reports is a half-mile undercover?
Yeah, look, it would be perhaps preferable to go in through the front door, take pictures of everything, take some stuff out, and then blow the stuff up, but just burn it from the inside out. That would be preferable. And frankly, if I think again, benefit of the doubt to the administration, if Khomeini was presented with two options, one of which is let us go in the front door and take this apart for you, the way we kind of did the Assad's chemical weapons program, and you get to live, as opposed to another option, door number two, which is some mix of the Israelis and we bomb the heck out of it and no promises for your own safety. Every day there seems to be a defiant statement from Iranian foreign minister, at least publicly, that says they're not interested in that. And so then we kind of get to door number two, which is the massive ordnance penetrator thing that you mentioned, which, I'll say I've seen a lot of reporting on this. I think some of it is overblown. Cracking a mountain is hard. The public statements about how deep down Fordo is, 250, 300 feet. There's other things that may be significantly deeper than that. That's a hard problem. You can, if you know where everything is, go after the tunnels, right? That's one way to skin this cat. But if you really want to put an end to it once and for all, because again, the Israelis have air superiority, they don't have ground superiority, then you may have to go that direction of trying to just bomb it. And it's by all accounts, the U.S. is sort of the only option for that particular capability that you allude to. It's tough. I'm skeptical about any metal object going through 200 feet of rock without melting. And so I think a better metaphor is creating a wedge. And, when you put a wedge into a rock, you usually have to hit the hammer more than once. And each hammer strike drives the wedge deeper and wider. And so it's probably not a one-off thing. It's probably a multiple thing and repetitive thing to dig a hole and do that. And so again, every weapon system is finite. Every weapon system is limited. There's a reason that we have Cheyenne Mountain under NORAD, under Cheyenne Mountain out west. It's hiding under a mountain is kind of a useful thing to do. And that's why the Iranians have done this. And so I think without going to nuclear weapons, and in the past we've talked about nuclear earth penetrators. We've had that in the past. Nobody really wants to do that, of course. And that's why this weapon system was devised.
So that's interesting. I like your analogy. You create a wedge and you need to hit it repeatedly. So that might mean it takes multiple massive ordnance penetrators to succeed here.
Well, it might. Of course, the question of damage assessment is an important one. Like, if you got it, would you know?
I see.
And that's where, again, walking in the front door would be preferable. Hauling the stuff out would perhaps be preferable. And blowing it from the inside would be greater BDA confidence. But the intransigence of the Iranians is a limiting factor here.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so if the United States gets involved, everyone is appropriately talking about how the Iranians might lash back out at us. And it usually comes down to we have a lot of bases in the region, and the Iranians have a lot of short-range ballistic missiles that they could use to hit our bases. Is that right? Does that survive expert scrutiny?
I would say that that's possible. Again, keep in mind that the Israelis are doing their darndest to defang the launchers and the kill chain on the missilery. But yeah, they keep getting stuff off, right? Because they don't have ground superiority. The Iranians have missile tunnels and missile cities and all this kind of stuff. Hard to know. We don't have perfect knowledge of what's been destroyed and what hasn't been. But I would say, yeah, I worry about that a bit, but I also worry about some of the other nasty things. There's enriched uranium, that a large quantity of it that seems to be unaccounted for. Folks worry about, where is that? But I also worry about, frankly, their terror cells. They presumably have cells to sow havoc or to have perhaps targeted killings around the Middle East and potentially in the United States. There's been plenty of press reporting on that over the years about their attempted assassinations. Some public indictments, you can go online and read those about attempts to kill the president in the past and other U.S. officials. So, I would think that it's a DHS, it's an FBI, it's those kind of folks are going to be, are no doubt spun up about Iranian potential reactive activity here and other places.
Iran's primary means of striking back at Israel appears to be their ballistic missile program. There's all sorts of discussion among people around town about how many ballistic missiles the Iranians have left, how many they need to shoot in order to overwhelm missile defenses in Israel. And if they shoot too few, missile defense in Israel, and maybe with the help of the United States, can shoot them down. Could you handicap for us the ballistic missile picture between Iran and Israel right now?
Yeah, so look, I think it's important. First of all, let me say, I think connecting Golden Dome to the current conflict is important because just look, the fact that missiles have become weapons of choice is frankly at the foundation of why we're having the conversation about Golden Dome. So we'll get there in just a minute. But look, the Iranians have spent many years and a lot of resources and a lot of efforts with their with the broader axis of autocracy to put together a pretty robust missile program, principally ballistic missiles, but also some other things. They have the largest ballistic missile program, of course, in the Middle East. I think probably even now what they've expended some 400 missiles or so. They're still the largest. And the conflict thus far, and I think it's important to connect this with the April 14 attacks of last year or the October attacks of last year, which were also quite substantial. The stunning thing, and look, Michael, I've been following missile defense for a while, but I'll just say that the intercept rate, both April and October and now this month, I think has been nothing short of a miracle. It's been surprising. No weapon system is perfect. Every weapon system is finite. And to be sure, missiles have gotten through. Too many people have been killed. But it's, just think about April 14 of last year, if 500 or 300 missiles had gotten through instead of a small handful. And then likewise, the situation today, we're again up to like 400 and some. This is Friday the 20th. We're recording this, and some 400 some missiles have come through. But I think it's also important to recognize that it's not just about the number of missiles. It is fundamentally about the, as the kids say, the kill chain. Mm-hmm. And what the Israelis have done a good job at, and what with the help of the United States have been intercepting a lot of stuff, but what they've also done a good job at is going after the rest of the kill chain. Because if that missile never takes off, then that's the best form of missile defense.
So this is going after the launchers.
Launchers, but also the, let's just say the broader C2 and the leadership. If the leadership isn't alive to issue the order, it may not get launched. And I would say, look at this astonishing success with and frankly, the efforts of Israel since October 7 have been transformative of their posture in the Middle East, and frankly, their posture toward their perennial enemies. Is it's showing the value of a counteroffensive, a bold counteroffensive. People were worried about Hezbollah having tens, if not hundreds of thousands of rockets in store. Not that many launchers, of course. And what they did was to target the very left of launch, the far left of launch, which is to say the human beings, that the leadership, the very bad guys who could have issued that. And you've seen a number of IRGC leadership, Intel leadership in Iran, rocket forces leaders that have been taken out in one way or another. And that is that's the counter missile efforts, not just missile defense.
So you say 400 have been launched from Iran at Israel so far. How many of those have been shot down either by Israel or By the way, I haven't read so much. I know we're in the region. Are we also currently shooting down some of the missiles aimed at Israel?
There have been press reports about, at least for instance, the THAAD batteries.
Yeah.
Where there's now 2 THAAD batteries. Keep in mind, the United States of America only has 8 THAAD batteries for the globe. We got 1 in Guam, 1 in South Korea, and apparently 2 in Israel. That makes THAAD the highest op-tempo unit in the joint force, surpassing now the Patriot Force, which has held that title for a very long time. And so they've been busy. They've been shooting stuff down reportedly, and that's a big problem for our THAAD inventory capacity, because the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is in the process of buying more THAAD batteries than the United States Army has.
Yeah.
And the number of rounds procured by the United States has been a remarkably small number in a given year, and we're chewing them up right now. So I'm going to predict that in the coming months, we're going to hear about an Israel supplemental.
Yeah.
And you're going to see a whole lot of folks get in religion about the need to massively increase our missile defense procurement efforts.
400 have been shot. How many have gotten through?
So I don't think we've seen hard numbers on that. It's probably in the low double digits there. I'll say that we're seeing in particular the missiles that apparently are hitting, civilian areas and things like that. I would not be surprised if the Iranians are not actually primarily targeting more military things. I think both sides are in it to win it, not just to hit the population and terrorize them, although the Iranians are fairly adept to the instrument of terror and using proxies for that purpose.
Yeah.
To be sure. But I think counterforce is probably the principal goal here on both sides. The Israelis are just a heck of a lot better at discriminate targeting. And, look, it used to be that ballistic missiles were called the poor man's Air Force.
Right.
The Iranians don't have an Air Force, basically, anymore, thankfully. And to some extent that's true. To some extent it's not true, because the progress of precision guidance and precision guided munitions makes it, if it's a substitute for air power, traditional air power, it's not so poor and impoverished as that phrase from the 1990s might lead you to believe. But nevertheless, some of the Iranian ballistic missiles are going to have better guidance and some of them worse. And so some of these that are going off course may be inadvertent, and some of them may be deliberate.
How many generally do they need to shoot, the Iranians, to overwhelm Iranian missile defense? I mean, ranges are fine.
Yeah, so that's the sort of thing the Israelis don't like to talk about. It's good reason. Also, I'll couch it in broad terms here, which is that there's every radar is capable of tracking a finite number of objects. And it's one thing to turn on your radar and surveil the sky and wait for something to come in. But when you actually got to start doing the tracking function as opposed to the surveillance function, that requires depositing greater amounts of energy on smaller parts of objects. And so it's a radar resource management problem. And so there are limits. And so those are sensitive numbers. The same basic principle applies to every air defender, to every missile defender, whether it be U.S. Aegis destroyers, whether it be Patriot batteries, whether it be Ukrainian air defenses from their many disparate sources. So those are some of the limiting factors, but it's not the capability that's so much in question. It's the capacity and the ability of the aggressor to construct an integrated attack, a complex and integrated attack that is well synchronized. I'll say April 14 of last year was supposed to be that. It was coming from multiple directions, multiple locations, and by the way, a mix of crews and so-called drones and ballistic missiles, basically designed to all arrive at Israel at the same time. And it's a miracle that it didn't have a greater success last year. But take that and then multiply it by an order of magnitude, and that's what we're up against for, let's just say, the defense of Guam, or the defense of Okinawa, or the defense of Pearl Harbor, or the defense of some critical sites in the United States.
Okay, so we're going to go to Iron Dome in a minute, and then we'll go out maybe to the Arrow missile system and then into Golden Dome. But, before we do that, and just to make sure I have this right, if the Iranians are shooting at our bases, we do have, is it Aegis missile systems that can help shoot these short-range ballistic missiles down? Are our bases going to be pretty well protected? What's your sense there?
So the Aegis weapon system aboard Aegis destroyers, they've been doing a lot of. They've got a pretty good batting average for the Red Sea operations in the past couple years. They've been shooting a lot of Standard Missile 2, Standard Missile 3, Standard Missile 6. One ship had to use its close-in weapon system at CSIS when something got through closer to the ship. It's, again, a miracle that an Aegis ship hasn't been successfully hit in all the different drone and missile attacks. But in terms of the base defense, yes, it's possible. Some of the Aegis destroyers could be in the right place to do that. You see at least another carrier group kind of steaming to the region at the moment. No doubt with some Aegis ships in tow that are loaded up appropriately for the mission. But there's other things. Again, I mentioned the 2 THAAD batteries in Israel, but also various Patriot forces. The United States of America has had Patriot forces in Bahrain since 1991, but you can't have Patriots everywhere. You can't have air defenses everywhere, and that's a challenge, but it's just a reality.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's start small and build upwards. Iron Dome is for rockets, am I right? And so that's not so much applicable in the current conflict.
Right, unless Hezbollah or Hamas begins to pop some stuff off. Hezbollah, it is pretty comical. I have to say, Hezbollah reportedly said to Iran, "Hey, we know you've been supporting us for decades and all that, but we're going to sit this one out, guys." So probably Iron Dome is going to be less applicable here. To be sure, it has been put through its paces. Iron Dome was doing its reps and sets over the past couple years and burning through a lot of Tamir interceptors. But it's the other things. It's David Sling, which was, I guess, reportedly employed recently here.
Yeah, what is David Sling? I was about to get to David Sling and then Arrow.
Yeah, so that's sort of the again, more on the shorter range ballistic missile. It has been used against other threats, I think aircraft in the past. And I think an errant SAM missile out of Syria or something like that reported several years ago. And then above that, you've got the Arrow family. You've got the Arrow 2, which is blast frag, Arrow 3, which is exo-atmospheric hit to kill. So think a telescope with a jetpack, kind of like the Standard Missile 3, that gets killing things in the vacuum of space. And when you see these, multicolored plumes of plasma in the sky above Israel, it could well be one of those exo kills. It could be from an Arrow 3. It could also be from a THAAD or an SM. Hard to know just by, again, squinting at video, which is usually a bad way to approach this sort of thing. And the Israelis are also in production of an Arrow 4, which is kind of a replacement, bigger, badder Arrow 2. And then they've reportedly fielded at least some kind of a prototype of their Iron Beam, which, if memory serves, had like $1.2 billion in funding from the last Israel supplemental just for Iron Beam for Israel, which is, of course, a laser. And they've got a handful of other things as well. But it's a family. It's a layered system. I would direct folks to my interview with Moshe Patel, the head of the Israeli Missile Defense Organization from last summer, where he kind of ran through, I think it was about a year ago, we kind of ran through the remarkable experience of April 14 and other engagements and what they learned, what they took away from it.
And that was an event at CSIS?
It was. And that's transcripts online, video and all that.
Great.
It's been getting quoted, I guess, lately because of the battles that's going on, the missile war that's going on right now. Folks are going back and looking at what he had to say appropriately. So.
All right, so the big picture then is the Israelis are successfully using an Arrow missile system, the Arrow missile family, to hit the long-range ballistic missiles or medium-range coming from Iran, and they're also getting good use out of David's sling for a similar purpose.
It's probably especially the arrows for the longer range threats coming from Iran.
Okay, gotcha. And I think I asked you this earlier, but there's no way to know how many they have or how many Iran needs to shoot to overwhelm all these systems, right?
Yeah. So again, the IDF has been quoted recently, I think yesterday in the Journal, about they're not going to comment on that, and they're confident about going forward. But again, I would just reiterate, I think if there's one concern that I have, it's capacity. Every weapon system is finite. There's no missile defense system that can just sit and play catch indefinitely. And that's why it is in Israel's interest to move quickly and to act with all deliberate haste, and why I believe it's in America's interest to help them do so, to end the threat by other means. That's do so.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more of our discussion with Dr. Tom Karako.
Beacon Global Strategies is the premier national security advisory firm. Beacon works side by side with leading companies to help them understand national security policy, geopolitical risk, global technology policy, and federal procurement trends. Beacon's insight gives business leaders the decision advantage. Founded in 2013, Beacon develops and supports the execution of bespoke strategies to mitigate business risk, drive growth, and navigate a complex geopolitical environment. With a bipartisan team and decades of experience, Beacon provides a global perspective to help clients tackle their toughest challenges.
What they're targeting is what you call TEL launchers, am I right? So shoot and scoot type launchers all over Iran, and the Israelis are hunting them?
Yeah, so again, it's the full kill chain. It's the launchers, it's the communication, it's the human beings, it's leadership. It's perhaps in a non-kinetic way, the ability of something to talk to the launcher. The Israeli ambassador to the United States has kind of alluded to some operations, maybe cyber, who knows, that are probably going to be coming out in the coming days or weeks, about how they not just took out missiles, but took out Iranian air defenses. I mean, really, the dog that didn't bark here is the Iranian air defenses, because it was just basically suppressed or neutralized in some manner from the get-go, which is pretty remarkable when you think about it.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so you mentioned cruise missiles. Is Iran also shooting presently cruise missiles toward Israel?
Yeah, so I'm a little surprised that there hasn't been more talk about that. If there have been, I haven't seen it reported. They have in the past, however. You know, the Shaheds they've been given to their Russian friends to use against Ukraine are essentially cruise missiles. They are the V1s or the buzz bombs of today, and so maybe that's a function of stores being taken out. Maybe it's some other factor. Again, they used a lot of that stuff in April 14, but they did not in October of last year. So there may be just greater numbers of ballistic missiles that they have recourse to, as opposed to those things. Hard to know.
Gotcha. And they don't have a hypersonic missile.
Well, they were just putting something out in the news about a hypersonic something or other the other day, and I think it's that's doubtful. Hypersonic fundamentally just means high speed and maneuvering. And I'm doubtful that what they have really fits the bill of what people mean when they say that.
Okay, gotcha. So surprised there's not more talk about the cruise missiles. Not apparent that they're hitting or shooting these presently. And I guess last thing on this, I don't feel like we're hearing as much about drones. I know that they used some in the first nights of the war. This is the Iranians back at the Israelis. Anything to say about the Iranians' employment of drones in this conflict?
Yeah, there have been some, I think, as you know, especially early on in the conflict. And it may be that, again, because they're low and slow, and because you can have a little bit of defense in depth in terms of being able to fry them, and unlike the Israelis that kind of, and frankly the Ukrainians that shipped them in and then employed them to great acclaim. I'm not hearing anything about the Iranians pulling off something like that. If you want to see the best depiction of that in cinema, go watch the opening scene of Angel Has Fallen from 2019, which still remains the best UAS threat, and it's the depiction of drones and trucks trying to assassinate a U.S. president. And it ought to spook you if if you haven't seen it.
I like it. Endorsement of a movie here. Okay. So Golden Dome, it seems the president is really excited about missile defense in general and protecting the United States. Of course, we've been talking about missile defense going back to, well, Reagan, but of course, George W. Bush also had a system. So maybe take us through briefly the recent history on missile defense in the United States and bring us up, and then I'll ask you about Golden Dome.
Yeah, so without getting too much history, for as long as there have been missiles, folks have been trying to figure out how to counter them and defeat them, to include airplanes knocking over V-1s in the Battle of Britain. But this is essentially the fourth moment in American history that a U.S. president has kind of been interested in missile defense. Nixon with Safeguard, Reagan, as you said, George W. Bush getting out of the ABM treaty and deploying what we call today the Ground-Based Midcourse Defense GMD system, which we still have today and are in the process of upgrading with a new and bigger missile. And I'll just say that the Golden Dome initiative, the Golden Dome is not a program. The Golden Dome is not a system. It's an initiative. It's a political initiative, I would say, and it is an accounting function of a pot of new money, more than anything. But there are these several different systems that we have today that are going to be critical to putting things together, to creating something that is greater than the sum of its parts.
So this is about the devotion of more money to existing missile defense systems.
In part, I think you're going to see heavy procurement, but I'll just say from an accounting perspective and a budget perspective, those are what are coming out of what the reconciliation bill calls munitions. And I'm going to predict that if there's an Israel supplemental, you'll probably see more procurement of existing systems. Golden Dome is a little bit more than that. It's about the integration of things together. It's the integration of the sensors, military and non-military sensors, and the development of new stuff as well. And so in terms of the reconciliation bill, over half of the quote-unquote Golden Dome bucket money is going to stuff in space. $7-some billion for space sensors, for the only program called out in the executive order from January, the Hypersonic and Ballistic Tracking Space Sensor, HBTSS, and about $5 billion for an initiative on space-based intercept, and we can kind of come back to that if you'd like, and then a handful of other things as well, that most of which has been kind of identified as a need, certainly space sensors, things like that, for some time. And this is why everybody just needs to simmer down. I think this is going to be far more in the realm of the possible than has been I think understood so far, and I'm optimistic that most of which is going to be done is going to have the potential for success.
Got it. Okay, so what exactly is the strategic driver behind the Trump administration's embrace of Golden Dome?
Yeah, so I would say that they need to do a much better job of articulating that publicly. The executive order had a couple, I would say, competing references for what that is. It talked about defense population infrastructure. It also talked about protection of counterforce, second strike capabilities. The strategic logic that I believe is most compelling, that needs to be talked about and articulated, is the specter of, going back to it again, complex and integrated attack, and specifically non-nuclear strategic attack. And so think about the sophisticated air and missile attack against our subpens, or against our command and control, or against our political leadership, or against our air bases and ports that would preclude us and pin up our power projection capabilities, most of which are within CONUS at any given time. Now, the White House and the politicals are, to be sure, emphasizing the population defense, and that's important. It's absolutely important, after all. But in terms of the strategic logic, there is the specter of terrorism of the American people, but I would think that an adversary, in terms of thinking about what they can get away with, short of a nuclear reprisal, is going to be non-nuclear attack on our military capabilities.
So around the time that Golden Dome was announced, there were charts put out, sometimes called range rings, which seemed to indicate that the Iranians would have an intercontinental ballistic missile capability that could hit the United States. I think it was maybe by 2035 or thereabouts. Do you buy that? And is that part of our strategic rationale?
So what I would say is that they've certainly been working on long-range capability that's been in lots of public reports, as you've said. I am modestly optimistic that this current conflict will provide a far more cost-effective way to contend with that threat decisively. The Iranian missile program, like the North Korean missile program, has been a burr under our saddle for way too long. It's been a cost imposition on us. And so this is just, reason 742 why it's in our interest to go in there and just schwack every, not just nuclear, but just dismantle their army and dismantle their missile forces and facilities and all that sort of thing.
All right. Well, you mentioned space-based sensors and interception. Walk us through that.
Yeah. So for years and years, we've had lots of big ground-based radars that are pumping large amounts of energy into the sky, looking up, looking for those lofted shots, looking for the ballistic missiles. And, an ICBM coming from North Korea or from Russia, wherever, is going to go high. It's going to spend a lot of its time in space, and those ground-based radars are going to see it, notwithstanding the curvature of the Earth. Break things that fly comparatively lower, most especially, but not limited to, hypersonic missiles that kind of bounce across the top of the atmosphere, significantly lower than those very high ICBM reentry vehicles. They're going to be obscured by the curvature of the Earth for much longer. Cruise missiles, likewise, low and slow, even more so. And so it really speaks to the need for elevated sensing. And I have many pet rocks. I love them all. Elevated sensing is one of them because if you try to fight the curvature of the Earth, you're going to lose every time. And so thermal sensing, or EOIR, electro-optical infrared sensors, are very useful for looking at those things that are hotter than a cold reentry vehicle in the vacuum of space, because they are encountering the friction of the atmosphere as they fly along and maneuver. Thin though it may be, nevertheless, hypersonic things are operating in a violent thermal environment. And so those kind of sensors are not radar, they're passive, but they're looking for those pixels of heat energy, and they can see that. And it's a necessity because the curvature of the Earth, and it's possible because of the heat that they generate.
So when you're talking space-based, it's the sensors, right? Or is it eventually we're going to fire interceptors from space?
So it's both.
Okay.
It's hard to group your shots. If I launch 10 things from one location and you only have one space-based interceptor that has a divert cone sufficient to get after that, well, then I've overwhelmed you. It's a scaling problem of space-based interceptors. Now, there's a number of trends. We have another report on this from a couple of years ago about why space-based intercept is becoming more possible. The trends, technological trends, not just launch costs, but other things as well, that are making it, from a capability side, more viable. But I think I'm gratified to see a significant wedge of funding here. I think, however, that there needs to be a much more innovative and imaginative way to get after this. I have some ideas than just the burnt pebbles of the past. I'll also say, however, that besides the technologies and the drastically reducing launch costs that make it more affordable, the other giant thing that has changed in recent years is the emergence of the widespread and bipartisan sense that space is now a warfighting domain. And so what I'm going to predict is that we are going to get space-based interceptor capability, but we're not going to get it in the way that people think. We're going to get it it's going to emerge as a subset of space fires. And so just as we have fires capability from our maritime and aerial and ground forces, we will be getting space fires in, through, and from space. When you get lots of space fires, I believe a space-based intercept capability will accrete. And so buckle up, because it is going to be uncertain, unstable by past approaches to this. And we are going to be thinking differently. We're going to be putting space and missile defense in the same sentence far more than we have in the past.
Gotcha. All right, 2 more questions before we wrap up. I see the arms control crowd out there talking about that if we move forward, of course, they've said this for years, but if we move forward with Golden Dome, it defeats the fundamentals of deterrence. Tell me a little bit about that, and do you buy that?
Yeah, so I would ask them to ask the Ukrainians if their air and missile defenses are stabilizing or destabilizing relative to the Russian aggression. I think many of these arguments are quite tired and tiresome. And I think, frankly, the conversation has changed. The conversation has changed since February of 2022 about this. I think missile defense against these new weapons of choice has fundamentally become a stabilizing force. I think that's kind of recognized. The global demand signal for active air and missile defense is massive. Again, the line around the block for acquiring some of these things is manifest.
But would they say, oh, that's just for that's tactical, not strategic?
Yeah, and that's exactly the dichotomy that I think no longer makes sense because of the specter of non-nuclear strategic attack. And, you tell me, are those missiles that are raining down on Ukraine, are they theater missile defenses or are they national missile threats, right? One man's theater missile threat is another man's national missile threat. That's a dichotomy that it was put into a 1995 executive agreement by the Clinton administration, if memory serves. It's kind of a vestigial organ of this conversation. Again, what matters is the target, the defended asset, and the effect. If you can put drones or cruise missiles into somebody's territory and then pop them off, it may be very much a quote unquote theater capability, but it's also been brought home. And this is why, again, these threats are coming to a theater near you. We've got to get rid of that intellectual baggage. It is so outdated. Having said that, there is a serious argument about undermining the quote unquote strategic stability of nuclear deterrence. And I would just say the bad news there is that there's going to be a number of things that begin to bring that into doubt, and missile defense is not necessarily at the top of the list. And so again, think about Operation Spiderweb. It was already in the minds of war planners, and now it's in the public consciousness. Think about if that was launched from, let's just say, some Chinese-owned farmland next to a bomber base, right? I remember I was getting kind of weirded out when you saw pictures of so many B-2 bombers on Diego Garcia. Anytime you group strategic assets together in one place, it becomes a fat, juicy target. And so whether it be our subs, whether it be our even our ICBMs, whether it be our bombers, there's going to be lots of threats to quote unquote strategic stability that are going to be so different than the way we thought about this in the past. In the past, the threat to those things was lots of high lofted shots that we would see coming in terms of, again, lots of SS-18s or SS-19s that took a while to traverse, not a long time, but nevertheless long enough for the radars to see and to be able to do something in return. There's going to be all kinds of problems to solve in terms of what happens when our stuff is targeted much more quickly without the big lofted shot, without necessarily the strategic warning. And so these are bigger problems. Missile defense is only a piece of that.
Yeah, gotcha. All right, last question, 2-parter on Ukraine. Were you surprised that our Patriot system was able to shoot down a Russian hypersonic missile? And finally, the big question, Spiderweb. Tell me what you thought of the Ukrainians being able to target Russian strategic bombers. It definitely was a morale boost, but as I understand it, The Russians could also use the strategic bombers to fire cruise missiles at the Ukrainians. What did you think of it all? Was it destabilizing? What do you think?
So first question on the Patriots. Actually, I think President Trump tweeted out something to the effect the other day of just how good American hardware is, and that has been proven in spades in the Ukraine conflict. But I also think, however, it's important to demystify this category of quote-unquote hypersonic missiles, because you're probably alluding to the so-called Kinzhal or Killjoy, which is essentially an air-launched ballistic missile. And it may be coming in at speeds more than Mach 5, but it also may not be doing the sort of advanced maneuvers that a true hypersonic glider may be capable. But look, that's what you get. That's what you get when you target your neighbor and start shooting them with missiles. They're going to eventually, once people stop tying their hands behind their back, they're eventually going to shoot back. And the best kind of missile defense is going after not the arrows, but the quivers and the archers behind the quivers.
Tom, thank you so much. This was an amazing tour of not just Iran, but Ukraine and the U.S. capabilities as it pertains to Golden Dome. Thank you so much for joining NatSec Matters.
Hey, happy to do so, Michael. Cheers.
That was Dr. Tom Karako. I'm Michael Allen. If you enjoy listening to NatSec Matters, please leave us a rating and review. We'd love to hear from you. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor, please email our team at bgs@bgsdc.com. You can also find this email in the show notes. Please join us next week for another episode of NatSec Matters.
NatSec Matters is produced by Steve Dorsey with assistance from Ashley Berry. NatSec Matters is a production of Beacon Global Strategies.